Mark Azalea is an industry leader in psychotherapy and men's mental health. He's helped countless guys get back on their feet, deepen their relationships, and excel in their lives. Now he's taken all that he has learned and is sharing it with you. In each episode, Mark will interview an expert in the field of masculinity and men's work. We'll cover topics such as emotional intelligence, masculine identity, anger management, financial health, trauma recovery, marriage and divorce, ethics, and spirituality. Tune in and become a better man.
Welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm here with Benjamin Owen, and he's the founder of the Awakened Man Project, which is an awesome group of guys that puts on tons of events. He's a professional men's coach, and he helps guys overcome self-sabotage, which is a huge issue. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I'm really excited to be here, and it's a pleasure to be having this conversation.
Yeah, I can't wait to learn more from you, learn more about you. So let's dive right in with your story. What got you into doing men's coaching?
I think it was working on myself, largely. I've been a coach since I was, before I knew I was a coach, I was a coach. Let me explain this. What I did is at a very young age, I was training my friends on the beach, doing personal training in parks. Literally anyone who wanted to do fitness and exercise and needed a guide, I'd help them out for £1 or £5, real super cheap. And this was like 16, 17, 18 years old. And I realized really, really young, early into my career, that sitting with people and listening to them and advising them and consulting with them was going to help them way more than the actual training. I was very lucky about that. And when I got my first gym when I was around about 23, I bought a little consultation room, and because I was paying for it, I just thought, I'm going to use this. I'm going to invite people in and sit with them and listen to the struggles around their health. And that turned into coaching. We often found that I was sitting listening to people talk about their relationships, their heartache, their lost, family members, all the reasons which would derail their diet or which would lead them to cope with alcohol or drugs or, being lethargic. And as I was on this coaching journey, I started, because I was earning an enormous amount of money. Enormous amount. I wasn't used to earning that amount of money. It came from really, really small amounts of money. My family was quite poor, in terms of money, but very rich in love. And I was just plowing this into self-development, really getting coaches and mentors. And I was working on myself. And the love from the experience of being coached, I don't know about you, Mark, it's a lovely experience, being coached, being mentored, being educated. I really found it was just my biggest value, biggest passion. And I think what happened was, although I was making huge changes in my life, investing lots in coaching and mentoring, when I faced my own crisis, which was around about 28, 29, where I got married and divorced in a year, I really struggled. Like, that really knocked me for six. And I just coped with that by throwing myself into exercise, like punishing myself hard in the gym, like really, really training, really hard and pushing myself and work. The workaholic showed up full strong, and I realized that couldn't perpetuate as a coping mechanism. I was going to go south. I was not going into a great place. And then I got told about a retreat, which was just a retreat. I never really kind of been on a men's retreat before, been on lots of retreats, but never a men's retreat. And my buddy who was running the retreat, he was a men's coach, said, "Oh, you should come. It'd be really good for you." And I went on it, and I learned some stuff that was just mind-blowing and explained so much of the struggles and challenges that I'd had over the last 10, 15 years. And that was it, kind of that process. Yeah, that was a 15-year
You dig into that
process.
a little bit? Like what was the retreat like? What did you take away from it? It sounds like that was perhaps your first questioning of masculinity, right? Or thinking about it in a more critical way. Yeah.
I'd never even thought about my own masculinity until then.
Yeah.
It never even crossed my mind. I don't think it needed to. Like, I just was a kid going about, I was still a boy. I hand on heart can say I was very much a young boy, stroke young man. didn't see myself as a man at that point in my life. Yeah, it was game changing, and being confronted by grown men who were questioning about their own masculinity really helped, and it was a conversation that I really enjoyed being part of.
Yeah. What were some of the takeaways? Like, what some of the doors that opened for you?
I think that the biggest one is like how much work I had to do on myself. We did this exercise. Have you ever done the exercise with a mask where you write all the things that you like to show to the world on the front of the mask?
Yeah.
And all the stuff you want to hide from the world on the back. Have you ever done that one?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wrote on the back of that mask, shit son. I just had this real, really insightful moment. I was like, I'm not the son that I want to be for my father. I really have a lot of shame around how I show up as a son for my dad. And my relationship with him wasn't where I wanted it to be. And that was one of the biggest realizations I had. I really needed to mend my relationship with my dad. Equally, there was a liar. I lied through exaggeration. And, everyone asked how much money I was making. I would always tell them more than I was, and I was already doing well. I had to exaggerate it, and I didn't understand why. And then the final one was this deep sense of lack of belonging. I was always trying to find somewhere where I belonged. And so that's why I created communities, to give people that feeling of belonging. So yeah, it was very profound.
Yeah, it sounds really, really powerful. And I think there's something incredible about being initiated as a man. This is what I hear you talk about, right? This idea of being accepted into the community of men and being accepted by older men specifically, that we don't get in our culture. So it's great that you went and sought that out for yourself.
Yeah, it was actually even the way that I sought it out was like, I made a promise. I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to come to the guy that was running the retreat, Craig. And on the last minute, I had a big tax bill that I hadn't paid. And last minute, I phoned him. It's like, hey man, I can't come. And he's like, is this a promise that you are not keeping? Where else are you not keeping promises in your life? And I was like, oh shit. And I was like, I need to fix this stuff. And I again, it was a part of me that I needed to work on. I had this, and I said, you know what, I'll be there. And I made this commitment, and I went and found the money, and I did, and I was there 2 days later. And it was just like that kind of being held to a higher standard by another man was something that I hadn't accepted into my life at that point. So yeah, it was a big, big change for me.
Yeah. So you do this retreat, right? It opens up all these new doors. What happens next? Do you start to go into men coaching right after, or are there more steps in the story?
Yeah, there was. I had a coaching practice, so I had a really great coaching practice. I started that when I was 23. I built it to when I was like 29. It was a really great. It was mostly women. It was actually mostly, ironically, mostly women. And when I went through my divorce, I just kind of, I'm like, I didn't want to be influencing anyone else in a state that I was in, so I just burnt it to the floor, shut it down. It was quite a significant amount of money that I kind of forwent with that. And I just worked on myself for about 3-4 years. And I got to this point and I was like, right, I'm ready to go and do something again. And I started looking for a guide. And I sought out a guy called Yassine. And Yassine was a psychotherapy trained business owner. He's got a really successful family business over in South Africa. Very, very, very great guy. Just an incredible man. And I asked him to be my mentor, and he mentored me for a year, for great mentoring skills. And I told him at the end of that, I was like, hey, I'm thinking of doing a men's group, because I've been trying to find this space where I could talk about masculinity, and I can't seem to find the guys. I can find guys who are like kind of counterculture and not in business, but I can't find the guys like me who love money and want success and are not broken, because I went to quite a few men's group and I loved the guys there, but they weren't my guys.
Yeah, totally good.
And Yeah, you'd be probably imagine you've been in the same, same sort of circles. And I wasn't broken. I never felt broken. I felt like I was just going through something, and I needed men around me. I just knew that I needed to be around men. And he said, "Well, why don't we do it together?" And I was like blown away. Like, what, my mentor wants to be in business with me, and I sat on it for probably about 2 months. I was like, I couldn't get over it. Anyway, I got over myself eventually, and he said, "Listen, are you going to do this or not? Go and take an offer out to some guys." And it was the pandemic, actually. It was the opening of the pandemic when it's kicked off. And then the guys said yes. They came and joined us, and we started my command project, which was the conversation before we started was like, I just want to say this before we get going on this. Like, I've got an unhealthy relationship with porn. I drink probably more often than I want to. I've got some really big victim thinking, and I'm not awakened. I'm very unawakened. And he said, that's exactly why you need to do this. And it's exactly why you need to lead this. And he was right. He was right. Every single thing I just talked about was gone. I've overcome all those things in becoming the leader of the program. And it was magical. It was watching these guys have the same experience. So it was a deeply transformational process, really.
That's really good, right? I mean, it's like you talk about holding yourself to a higher standard, right? It sounds like the program held you to that higher standard too. Where it's like, man, if I'm going to be the leader of the Awakened Man Project, I better get my shit together,
Yeah,
it was. Figure out some of these things, yeah.
Yeah, and I love this idea of struggling in plain sight. Yes. I think there's a lot of safety in just like people knowing what I'm struggling with, being open and honest about things, because I was so close for such a long time. And I just find a high degree of safety in that. And I just was open with my men, the guys that I was leading. And I was like, I'm working on my stuff too. And very, very lucky to come across some great, great speakers and people that came to talk to the men on the program. And, Dr. Robert Glover, he came on, like the guy who wrote Mr. Nice Guy, came on and he shared about how he does his work with his men and his men's work and in men's group. And we had Barry Michaels, who's Phil Stutz' business partner from Stutz, the documentary. He said he's open and honest about his struggles with his clients. And it just was really, really affirming to me that it's all relational. And if I want to lead from a place where I know best, which is in the trenches with my guys, that's how I want to lead. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I think it's critical, right? It breaks down the guru thing. And I think a lot of guys, especially now, we're cynical, probably for good reason, that we don't want like a perfect leader. We don't want to be bullshitted. We don't want to be scammed. We have all these things. And I think being transparent shows that. It's like, yeah, I'm one of you, right? Like I'm sitting in a different chair right now, but it doesn't mean that I think I'm better than you or anything, right? We're kind of all in this together.
Yeah, I heard an expression a while ago, like you can either be the sage on the stage or the guide by the side. And I'm like, I know where I want to be.
Yeah. So as we're moving towards the end of the segment, can you just say a little bit for our listeners about what the Awakened Man Project is, like logistically, what it offers, how people sign up, like what's the deal?
Well, we just realized that like my inherent belief is that men's work is the personal development for man. I believe that to my core. If you want a man who's crossed the threshold of his 30s, you haven't been initiated or you haven't had a great fathering experience, there's going to be gaps in the way that you show up as a man. There's no two ways about it. And the only way that you're going to learn this is by being around other great men, like, and learning together every single day and filling in each other's gaps with good leadership, good guidance, and good community. And I think what I wanted to create was exactly that. And I've learned more from the other men in my men's group than any personal development I paid hundreds of thousands of pounds to learn in the last 10 years previous to that. And so what I just wanted to create is a place where guys could learn from guys. Yeah,
so people can sign up for groups online. I hear you got speakers. Like what kind of services?
So what happens is we meet frequently. We have like a couple of calls a week, and guys, we coach, we do therapy together, we have speakers in, we work through books together. There's a myriad of curriculum where we look at everything from being an absent father to relationship with your partner to overcoming victim thinking. And it's just the parts that we miss out when we don't have that father figure that can teach us that, or the men in our life, because I know a lot of guys now, they treat themselves like a lone wolf, and then they've got no one to learn from, no one to sharpen the iron sharpen iron, all that jazz. So what we provide is all of that online, and it's an opportunity for guys all over the world to come together and work on themselves.
That sounds really incredible. Yeah,
I
think guys need other guys, just like you're saying. We need that community. There's something special when you have a lot of guys that are all working towards the same mission of self-improvement that is powerful. And I think men operate in groups, right? Even though there's this thing in Western society about the lone wolf or about the anti-hero or the man against the world. Like that's just dumb, right? Yeah. Like if you look through history, like it's been the hunting party, it's been the fire team, it's been the squad, right? Like it's been the family. The unit has been the group. It hasn't been just like this one Rambo character. So it's great that you're providing platform and connection for guys to find their squad, to find their team.
Oh, thank you, man.
So we're going to move to our first commercial break. When we get back, I want to hear more about, I guess the power of community. I want to talk about self-sabotage. I want to talk about maybe some case studies of how you've seen some guys grow. There's a lot of good stuff here. So if you're listening, hang on in there, and we'll see you all on the other side of the commercial break.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
Men's Therapy Online is now accepting new members. Men's Therapy Online offers a solution to the lack of outlets for emotional expression, positive role models, and access to meaningful milestone experiences. In our post-COVID world, loneliness is at an all-time high. Men need consistent community. Our society is rapidly changing. Old models of masculinity are falling at the task of promoting emotional intelligence and meaningful connection. Men's Therapy Online offers tools and experiences designed to help the man who is struggling to balance traditional male roles and emotional fluidity. Whether you need to get back on your feet or take your life to the next level, Men's Therapy Online has your back. We help our members become a true 21st century man. A man who is not burdened by the rapid change of society, but who contributes to it honorably. If you're interested in signing up and finding your band of brothers, go to menstherapy.online to learn more. That's menstherapy.online. Start your journey today.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to the Men's Therapy Podcast with Mark Azalea. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@menstherapy.online or visit www.menstherapypodcast.com. Now, back to the Men's Therapy Podcast.
Welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm sitting here with Benjamin Owen, the founder of the Awakened Man Project, and we're talking about male community and how powerful it can be for guys to be around other guys that are just kind of, getting after it, right? And one thing you specialize in that I want to just give you the platform to talk about is self-sabotage. I think a lot of guys feel this. I know I feel this, right? So I'm interested personally too about it. This idea of, we know that we can be operating at 100%, but we're stuck around 75 or 80. And we're not quite sure of what's going on, right? Like, why are we not giving that full power when we need it? So take it away.
Yeah, I actually got accused of self-sabotaging, and I was like, no, I don't self-sabotage. No way. I'm a successful guy. I'm success-minded. I want to push myself. I don't cause myself pain or suffering to stop myself moving forwards. No way. Anyway, when it was presented to me in this fashion, I was like, hang on a second, and let's take a beat and just want to give some constructs around how I worked out I was self-sabotaging to that nth degree. I realized that in every moment where I had huge opportunities to move forward in my life, I'd do something dumb. And it was something insignificant, like miss a small detail, or I would succumb to an impulse or a desire. And I was really struggling to get my head around this because I didn't have the language around self-sabotage. I was like, okay, well, I've heard of self-sabotage. It sounds like willful destruction of a plan. And I don't willingly destruct my plans. I make plans. I sometimes don't follow them because they don't work out or they're too big, but I don't self-destruct. But anyway, we got in touch with one of the authors of the book, The Tools, which had a Netflix documentary up recently called Stutz. And in the documentary, they talk about this idea of Part X. Anyway, I reached out to the authors, and they're very, very famous psychotherapists. They came and spoke to our men, and I thought they were just going to come and talk about these tools. But Barry, who came and talked to us all, he talked about this idea of this self-sabotage, this inner enemy, this Part X. And I was like, oh my gosh, he started talking about this part of us that is there to, can I swear?
Yes. Yeah.
To fuck our life up. And I was like, and he used that same terminology. He swore, and I was like, and he said, I'm just going to say it how it is. Part X, this part of you is there to fuck your life up. And it's to keep you small, keep you safe, and keep you secure. And because if I can make tomorrow the same as today, it's more likely that I'm going to feel safe. And I got that. And then when he put it like this, I really got it. Is that Newton's third law is every force has an equal and opposing force. So if I'm a guy and I've got this great, massive, huge force for growth in me, and I want to make the world, I want to change the world, I want to create a movement, and that's what I've always had a desire to create movements, to bring people together, to do something bigger than what's going on out there. But that force is going to be met with an opposing force and an internal force for destruction. And that is your self-saboteur, your inner enemy, your Part X. And like, as I started reading around this, I was doing a short course on it for people. And if you read like the chimp paradox, like do the work by, what's his name? You got the upper limit problem you got the upper limit issue by Gay Hendricks, a big book in the coaching space. There's the Diabolos, the Bible talks about it. In all of these texts and personal development teachings, there's this inner saboteur, this part of you that's there to stop you. And I didn't realize that was what was going on. And for me, what would happen is I would have a really famous guest come on. They'd come on to Wake and Minds, come and deliver a session. I'd mess up the time zone. Or I would miss a seemingly really significant question out on a business deal. And I'd cost myself a fortune. And at the moments I most need to pay attention, I was softening and not heightened. And this was all starting to make sense to me. And I was like, oh no, I actually do self-sabotage. I can really see this now. And when I started to learn and understand this idea of this Part X, this part of you that is there to X out your potential, that made so much sense to me. It was a concept. It worked. It made lots of sense. And then as I started to learn about where it shows up in my life, when there's risk, when I was about to go on stage. So I would during, and post risk is the most likely time you're going to have a sabotage attack from Part X. You go pre-stage, before I go on stage, you don't know what you're doing about. You're a fake, you're a phony. Someone's going to call you out. Imposter syndrome, people call it. You get on stage and you get all those nerves and those jitters. And then after you've taken the risk, after you've bared your soul on stage and talked about your life, or because I talk about quite openly my life and things, you've overshared. Can't believe you said all that. Someone's going to, no one was really listening. They didn't come for that today. And I had to deal with that. I I tried to do all the stage speaking masterclasses, and those feelings never went away. And so that was like it's a real cue for me that was the new work for me. Yeah, so that's kind of how I started seeing it appear in my own life.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I like your example of it being, missing small details, right? Or making small mistakes and stuff that you wouldn't make those mistakes in other ways. They'd be like, little things that you go over, but in these critical moments, there's like that stumble. And you talked a little bit in the beginning of other examples. I think the ones that people, relate with is alcohol and drugs, right? Or like, infidelity, or those kind of big things that crush people's lives. I was also curious, you mentioned like lethargy, and I'm curious about that one because I think that one doesn't get talked about nearly as much as those like big kind of like nukes to people's lives,
Yeah, and just thinking about not just myself, because obviously it's great when you hear someone talk about how they found something and it worked on them, but this has helped multiple clients. And I'm going to give you an example. I had one guy come to the Awaken Man project, and one of the biggest struggles is that if he got a knockback, he took it as a complete knockout. So a no on the phone for a sale would lead to him licking his wounds for a month or two. Like, he wouldn't hear from him. And understanding the language and the landscape of self-sabotage and part X allowed him to see that it was just this part of him that was there to shut down his potential. He turned that 2-month knockback, knockdown, knockout, whatever you want to call it, into a month. And then one day he was like, Ben, I can't believe it. I'm still getting knocked back, and I still, I'm hurting for 2 weeks to a month. I'm like, dude, it used to be 2 months. And then, it happened again, and he got knocked back, and he was like, I can see it now. When I got knocked down with this same sort of problem, I was broken for 2 months. Actually, it's only been a week. And I was like, dude, it'll be 30 minutes soon, and it'll be momentary soon. And that's what his biggest shift was while he worked with us. He turned a 2-month knockback into half an hour, where he went into do a stage speaking event, and he saw some people he didn't get on with too well, and he went into victim mode, and really got in a spiral, and he was able to get himself out of that within 30 minutes. Now that for me is real success, where he was able to manage his mind to the point where he's able to rescue himself out of a situation like that.
Yeah, that is a big success. And I think your role of having a man that can hold him accountable and hold up that mirror is really powerful. Because a lot of guys, we're not seen in that. A lot of our struggles are secrets, right? They're private, and sometimes we don't make progress because we try to do it alone. I was really curious about this victim mentality thing. It's something that I talk about a lot, and that I, see with a lot of my clients. And it's so wild because a lot of my clients, and I'm sure yours, are fairly affluent, right? They have a lot of things going for them, right? They come from decent families. I mean, some people, of course, have abuse and et cetera, but for the most part, like, it's pretty good. They work jobs, like they have a good home, they have wife, kid, whatever, right? But this victim thing is so prevalent in so many men. I see you nodding over there. So yeah, I'm curious, like, what do you think about that? Because it's always been so paradoxical to me.
Yeah, I just nodding because I went through that, and I think I still have shades of that. I can get myself out of victim feeling. I think anytime you get to that point where you've got your emotions are running higher than you've lost control of, like when your emotions are that high that you've lost control of your state, that gap in between decision and like impulse and action, that's when you've lost control. And I think that's when the victim is most potent. And that's why I wanted to find a way to help men reclaim that space, that as Viktor Frankl talks about it, that decision point or that choice point between stimulus and response. It's like in any given moment, that final freedom is that ability to make that choice, is to choose your attitude in any given moment. And for me, that's what I realized. I came from a very reactive background with my parents, both of my parents super reactive. Whereas what I've noticed as I've slowed down and become more conscious as a man, and then also just as an owner of my life, things can happen that are not too favorable, but yeah, I've slowed the reaction down to the point where I'm actually making a conscious choice instead of a reaction. And that for me was the game changer.
Yeah, I think similar for me, because I had it growing up, and for me it was more like the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset after reading, that book, right? Of the fixed mindset being, okay, if there's a mistake that gets made, I'm wrong, there's blame, it's somebody's fault, right? Like either I'm bad or they're bad, right? Where the growth mindset, which I'm sure you live in most of the time with the entrepreneurial stuff too, is like, okay, there's a failure, but how do we move it towards success, right? Failure is information to learn. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong or I'm bad or that I'm a bad person or a bad man or business owner. But yeah, there is that kind of mental gymnastics of like, okay, there's information in this failure. It doesn't mean that I just suck,
Yeah, I think I had to get used to getting that feedback. I remember we had a customer service expert come into my first business in the gym, and she had to give me some really hard feedback from clients about how I was showing up in the gym. And part of, 25-year-old, I've got 12 staff, some of them are older than me. I own the gym. I had to learn pretty quick to take feedback. And I wasn't able to do that as a young 20-year-old. I was like, if someone gave me negative feedback, I was so deeply hurt by it. It's just like, so I think what was quite freeing was to be able to say thank you for, all feedback. And that's what I teach a lot of guys, like, it's just feedback. It's okay. It's okay to be hurt by it as well. So yeah, it was a really interesting journey.
Yeah, I mean, similar. When people give me feedback, I would just make them wrong. I'd be like, oh, they're stupid for X, Y, and Z reasons. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. Like, have they looked at themselves in the mirror, right? It's like complete, retaliation. And now it's a practice of like, okay, see that as a gift, because people are rarely honest with each other, and if like you can get feedback in a way that's honest and hopefully has, a foundation of compassion or wanting to help you grow, that's such a gift. It's such a gift to get that, instead of just being kind of like lied to or ignored or talked behind people's backs or whatever, right? Which is all too common these days. Yeah.
And I think it's like, I can simultaneously have some really cutting, hurtful thing said to me now. I'm like, oh, I agree with you on some level. So there's obviously something that needs to be fixed here. And that level of consciousness is taking work. It's taking a lot of work. And I love it when I see the same in the guys, because every single week they're getting guys challenge them hard. And that's that high challenge environment. Is guys are used to saying, can I just call you on your bullshit there? Politely and respectfully. And guys like, yeah, absolutely. And then you see guys just really being honest with each other. And that was just life-changing to watch guys care about each other that much. They would be respectfully honest. So yeah, to have that in my life, to watch that. I'm the leader of the hot seat. I'm the coach, but most of my clients do the work for me.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so important. I mean, when I work with my clients, right, the number one thing they say is exactly what you said, right? I ask them, hey, how could I be a good therapist for you, right? And they say, call me on my bullshit. Don't let me get away with stuff that other people in my life let me get away with. And I think that is so critical, that I think men need that. And like you said, foundation of respect, foundation like a container, right? Like, it's not being mean, it's not bullying, but we respond to challenge. Men grow through challenge. We need to feel like we're strong and that we're heroes and we can overcome things,
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting, when I was in the first part of my struggle, I had a female therapist, wasn't going anywhere. She didn't challenge me. She agreed with all my bullshit. And she wasn't in the right energy to hold me to where I needed to be held up to in order to heal. And yeah, that's what was really transformational. It was actually men that helped me do that.
Yeah, it's all too common. You have, I call them like validation therapists, right? They just agree with you. It's like, I don't want to pay you to agree with me. Like, I know I fucked up, right? I need help. You don't have to agree about that. So anyway, we're going to move to our final segment here. When we come back, we'll talk directly to you, the listener, about how you might overcome that part X, how you might work with the victim mentality, and how you might grow to be a better man. Benjamin's got a lot of great advice and suggestions when we come back from the break. So hang on in there, and we'll see you on the other side.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
Men's Therapy Online is now accepting new members. Men's Therapy Online offers a solution to the lack of outlets for emotional expression, positive role models, and access to meaningful milestone experiences. In our post-COVID world, loneliness is at an all-time high. Men need consistent community. Our society is rapidly changing. Old models of masculinity are falling at the task of promoting emotional intelligence and meaningful connection. Men's Therapy Online offers tools and experiences designed to help the man who is struggling to balance traditional male roles and emotional fluidity. Whether you need to get back on your feet or take your life to the next level, Men's Therapy Online has your back. We help our members become a true 21st century man, a man who is not burdened by the rapid change of society, but who contributes to it honorably. If you're interested in signing up and finding your band of brothers, go to menstherapy.online to learn more. That's menstherapy.online. Start your journey today.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to the Men's Therapy Podcast with Mark Azalea. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@menstherapy.online or visit www.menstherapypodcast.com. Now, back to the Men's Therapy Podcast.
Welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. In this segment, we talk directly to you, the listener. So, Benjamin, we've been talking a ton about self-sabotage in Part X. So I'm curious for the guys out there, how might they spot self-sabotage? How do they know if they're doing it?
Yeah, great question. So this is what really helped me, is just knowing the symptoms of self-sabotage. How is it showing up in my life? And when you can spot it, you can label it. And believe it or not, that's 80% of the work. That's how you're going to get a real great grip on this. If it's something that you know or aware, or even, and this is something that I learned, is that most people, until they become aware of what or how they self-sabotage, it's running around about 80% of their decisions and choices. It's actually, it's a big thing for a lot of people. So the first one is an impulse, that you cannot go without the thing that you want. That not having that thing is going to lead to death. Now, it's like, honestly, this is what we have when we're addicted to our phones, cigarettes, drinking, whatever it is. It's like, if I don't have this thing, I'll die. So deprivation equals death. Well, actually, deprivation is a path to life. When I forgo technology, or when I forgo, when I spend distraction-based media, I feel more alive. And so it's noticing impulses that come up just when you're about to do something creative, like a creative endeavor. I go to write my podcast notes in the morning, and I get this massive urge to check my phone, because my Part X knows that if I fracture my attention, I'm way less likely to move forwards. So it's watching for these strong impulses for your phone, cigarettes. It's you sit down for guys, you sit down to do meaningful work and you feel this urge to go and jerk off. Mm-hmm. It's like, what's going on there? If that's your Part X at work, it's self-sabotage, because if it can steal that moment, it's a moment you're not moving forward and doing something that's going to propel you into that force for growth. And that blew my mind when I found that out as well. Like, that was, Mark, that was my biggest part. And when I learned that, I was like, I got you. So just labeling it, bit of ridicule. I know the way I treat it is like a bit of ridicule, like, you nearly got me, man. And I'll throw my phone over the other side of the room, or I'll just like, you got me. And I built that relationship with that part of myself that's trying to stop me moving forward. So impulse is the first one. The second one is a victim narrative, that the world is against you. And this may show up from a certain specific person that's giving you a hard time. And then you create that person's voice in your head and you react to it. Mark's nodding away there. You can, yeah, it's like
I see it all the time. Yeah, where like people have this like nemesis, right? Or this like antagonist in their life. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I always say for my guys, it's like Severus Snape, the idea of this Severus Snape character in your life that you, and you can be like doing the dishes. And all of a sudden, whether it's your wife, whether it's your Severus Snape character, your boss, you play an event that hasn't even perhaps happened in your head, and you react to it, and you steal your state in the moment. You drop into the maze. You drop into a state that's not going to help you move forward in your life. So say, for example, you're doing the dishes. You're then going to go and record a video or do some great work. You've lost your state, which would allow you to go and take meaningful action. And that's the whole point. Really powerful. The third one is hopelessness, which is that what I talked about, confusing a knockback with a complete knockout. So this is where you go dating and you get one rejection. So all men, all women are a waste of time. And so many people do this, and they realize that one rejection on a sales call, that one time they go to the gym and they fall over a weight and they make themselves look like an idiot, they totally overcalibrate. And we've got to remember that, that a mistake is a mistake. You can go again. And that for me was like a big one. It's like, oh yeah, if I don't get something right the first time, sometimes I just spit my dummy out and I'm not doing it now. And it's in that moment which we really need to commit higher to moving forwards. And if you think about it, if there's a part of our brain that says that we want you to be the same and safe, we don't need to move forwards, you're doing something creative. If I can get in there at a point where you make a mistake and stop you from moving forwards, I'm going to take every chance I can get. Mm-hmm. And that was like, wow, that was like, what? So that's self-sabotage? Yeah, 100%. Because you're at the foot of an opportunity and you're willingly doing something that's stopping you from moving forwards. And there is a choice there.
Yeah. So what do people apply in that moment? Say they catch it, right? They catch the moment. Like what tool, mantra, affirmation, I don't know, like what helps people like get over that hump? So
there's the two R's for me is rage and ridicule. So rage is just powerful cosmic like force of rage. It's like rage. It is like, no, I'm not doing this right now. Fuck off. And like, it's like a powerful, get away. And this is not what I need right now. And it's actually presenting or externalizing that part X as a character. So for mine, Severus Snape or a person outside of myself, it's like, no, stop that right now. I don't need to be distracted. I need to get on my work. It's a powerful boundary setting exercise where you're not allowing yourself to drop into that distracted version of yourself and you get on with what you're doing. So rage, and the other one is ridicule. It's like, you got me. I can't believe it. You nearly tricked me. So like doing the dishes, that's me. Sometimes I'll be doing the dishes and I'll drop into this state where I'm winding myself up about something that's not happened. I'm like, I know what you're trying to do there, brain. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to steal my state. I got you. And then that allows you just to reclaim, like, I'm good. And they were the first two things. So label it, rage or ridicule. And there are actually some tools that you can use, like, the tool being like, it's called cosmic rage. It's I learned this from Phil and Barry. It was like, you just use a force of rage within you to just push it away. And that's the only time I'd ever convince a client to use rage. So really it was like, that was a big one for me. And just learning to label it, use rage or ridicule, and then just spell it. Just really allow yourself. And then, but the most important thing is that you move into the creative endeavor or the action that you were going to take that's the most important thing. You create that trust within your mind that this thing that you weren't going to do, you go and do, because that's how you build self-confidence.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to take it a level further, what I talk to my guys about is two things. One is getting good at being bad at stuff, right? Like being good at being incompetent. I think a lot of people don't have that. And if you can refine that, that's like a superpower, right? Like being like coming into it and just admitting to yourself, having a place of acceptance of, hey, I'm going to suck at this and I'm going to explore. I'm going to make mistakes. It's going to go really slow, but like, I'm just going to keep chipping away and not expecting yourself to be perfect, you know? And I think, you know, the other thing is this idea of just, yeah, I guess it's the same thing actually, I think about loud, like just the lack of it needing to be perfect or complete, right? Being okay with good enough, right? And being able to ship something that's good enough, knowing that, like you said, with the mistake, you can take another take, you can keep moving forward and iterate on it. I see so many guys just get totally paralyzed because they get out there, they make that video and that video sucks. And then it's a knockout, right? To use your language, and they're done and they can't move forward. Rather than being like, you know what, I'm just going to post this, I'm going to move forward. And the next one's going to be, you know, 5% better.
Yeah. I think that's something I really struggled with. Like I wouldn't have called myself, I wouldn't have called myself a perfectionist. But I realized it did show up for me. And when I got clear on it, I was like, oh, it does show up for me. Unless it's perfect, it doesn't go out. I was like, right, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about, so this is kind of like coaching versus therapy, right? I think about rage and about depression, right? And using this model, I think depression could be seen as extreme self-sabotage, right? Like self-sabotage on every single front to the point of paralysis. And what I see with a lot of my men, particularly, is that rage is the first thing that they can access, right? Because a lot of these depressed guys, underneath it is they're really fucking angry, right? They're angry at the world, they're angry at themselves, they're angry at their parents, they're angry at their boss, whatever. And that power, like you said, is so mobilizing. It's so powerful. You get someone to tap into that cosmic rage and that thing of like, fuck no, like I'm going to fight for my life, right? Like it's worth it. It's worth it. I'm not going to just stay here in the bed or drink myself to death or whatever, right? Like I'm going to pick up the sword and charge forward. So I think rage is a really important emotion for men. I love that you're talking about it because it gets so shamed and put away in traditional therapy and maybe even traditional coaching. But I think as men, we need to learn how to harness that aggression instead of pretend like we don't have it, because we have it. We're apex predators of planet Earth, you know, like we're serious. Men are serious. We got to understand that, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was like, my relationship with anger was really poor, and like this is why I didn't have that ability to go, no, like fuck, you know, just fucking focus, man. And like that's what you'll hear me. I'm sat at my desk and I'll be writing in the morning, and like you'll hear these, you know, me saying, "Fucking focus, come on," and it's from a place of real love and support, and it's a real it's good to be able to use that emotion instead of fear it and avoid it, and so I have to sell rage to a lot of guys.
Yeah, because, you know, especially I think in the modern era, like we don't want to be perceived as being a predator, right, or being like aggressive or being mean or being, you know, chauvinist or whatever, right? Like there's so much shame around male rage. And I'll tell you, I mean, it's definitely done some shitty things in the world, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, that is really our power is in that, you know? Yeah.
And like, there's two more I think that we were worth mentioning before is the energy part. And I didn't see this, is that you wake up in the morning, you look at your calendar and you just say, I haven't got enough energy for all this. And so then you start, you know, sabotaging yourself by reducing commitments, playing smaller. And this was a real channel of thinking that I never was even used to, is that that I had to seek energy from the outside world. Like I had to fill myself up outside in thinking. And there was a real profound shift when I started what I call tools work, you know, working with the guys who do the tools, is that we've got everything we need. And it's about harnessing that and creative expression. So that was a big shift for me personally. And when I check in myself, when I say, I need a coffee in the afternoon, I'm like, well, why do I need a coffee in the afternoon? What is it like I haven't got enough energy? Have I got a caffeine deficiency? And it wasn't. It was so it's really allowed me to rely on myself way, way more. And that's been a massive, massive game changer. And there's other symptoms, and I could talk about how you can access them, and later on in the podcast. But I just wanted people to be aware of these things because they were so profound for me, and the guys I work with as well, is them learning. There's this, I'm building a profile of this part of them which is there to stop them from moving forwards. They can actually name it and tame it. And I think that's what was happening for a lot of the guys I worked with. Is like, right, well, that's just how I show up and sabotage myself. Okay, now I'm aware of it. The symptoms show up. I'm way, way more equipped to shut it down, reclaim my state, and move on. And I think that's been a big part of my own success personally. And it's great to see it wasn't just me that was experiencing that, and these tools worked as well. And you don't need to go deep into some psychological mantra or thinking. It's just that you're able to do it very, very quickly. It's 5 seconds, and you're right back in the state that you wanted to create your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really well said. And it makes me think back to what we talked about very early on in the show of this idea of keeping promises. And when you're talking, what I just keep thinking is like, yeah, like Benjamin, you've learned how to keep promises to yourself, right? To like do those things and keep showing up, and shit, man, like that's the basis of self-esteem, right? Like if you know that you're a dependable man with yourself first and foremost, that's really powerful. We have to start to wrap up here, but Ben, where can people find you online if they want to learn more about you or the Awakened Man Project?
Yeah, thank you. So the best place to find us is probably Instagram now. We've done a lot on Instagram. Is like at the Awakened Man Project, and at Coach Benjamin Owen. I'm showing it more on there. I love to put things out. I want to share with the world more. But if you want to learn more about Part X and resistance and all the what we've been talking about, I actually made a 7-part audio series, which is totally free, because I wanted to share that with the world because I felt it was so helpful for me. And you find that at innerenemy.com. innerenemy.com. It's totally free. It's podcast format. If you listen to this, you listen to podcasts, and it's just like innerenemy.com. Super easy to find, and you just download it. It sits in your Spotify or your whatever you listen to your podcasts on, and yeah, you have a great listening experience.
Great. Yeah, go check those things out. We'll put all those in the show notes too, so you can click around and check that stuff out. Yeah, thanks again for tuning into the Men's Therapy Podcast. Benjamin, thanks for coming on the show. And listeners, we'll see you next week, another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.
Thank you for joining your host, Mark Agile, on the Men's Therapy Podcast. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel and anywhere podcasts are found. To support the show, leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. For more information or to apply to be a guest, visit www.menstherapypodcast.com.